Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com. Much of climate alarmism is centered around this graph from NASA. The graph purports to show that there's been a huge amount of warming over the past century. The person currently in charge of this graph at NASA is this masked man. Gavin Schmidt has me blocked on Twitter because he doesn't like me exposing his misdeeds. Gavin says that 1921 was one of the coldest years on record. But the written record from 1921 says the exact opposite. New York Herald, September 4th, 1921. Death for millions in 1921's record heatwave. The great heatwave, which has spread over the world during the present summer, has no parallel in history. There have been hot waves, there have been famines, there have been pestilences at various times and in many places, but none so blighting and terrible as this. Abnormally high temperatures have prevailed in almost all parts of the northern hemisphere and have continued for an unprecedented length of time. The San Francisco Chronicle reported a worldwide heat wave and drought. In Switzerland, melting glaciers and snow caused floods and avalanches which spread havoc. The sides of mountains which had been covered for centuries with snow and ice were exposed to the sun's rays and cracked and fell, burying whole hamlets and sweeping away forests. The New York Times reported on October 3, 1921, a worldwide heat wave of unusual length and intensity. The Graphic magazine from London reported, "This October, like the summer, is beating all heat records." From October 4th through October 10th, 1921, London averaged about 80 degrees Fahrenheit. That was about 30 degrees above normal. In the northern hemisphere, this abnormal weather is universal. In eastern Russia, it has caused a colossal tragedy. It was very hot in 1921, so why are NASA and Gavin Schmidt claiming that 1921 was one of the coldest years on record? Let's look at NASA's claim in more detail. This is NASA's temperature anomaly map from the summer of 1921. Their map shows that temperatures were well below normal during the summer of 1921, with just a few warm places. The San Francisco Examiner reported that during the summer of 1921, the Eskimos around Spitsbergen were very hot. The heat wave struck Spitsbergen and caused the Eskimos to throw away their furs and organize bathing parties, while the reindeer and other game suffered terribly. But if we look at the map, we can see that NASA completely missed the heat around Spitsbergen. NASA showed just about normal or below temperatures. The San Francisco Examiner reported that the heat in Rome was unbearable that summer. But once again, NASA completely missed the heat around Rome. What about the heat around Switzerland, which was causing the glaciers to melt and collapse? Well, NASA missed that too. The Cincinnati Enquirer reported a record heat wave around Alaska, which was unprecedented and had no scientific explanation. NASA missed the heat wave in Alaska as well. It's pretty clear that NASA historical temperature graphs and maps have no credibility. They have nothing to do with reality. My beautiful wife Kyrie collected a couple of maps from the NASA website to help us understand why NASA has no clue what they're doing. NASA claims to know global temperatures since 1880, but they only have a few stations outside of the United States, Western Europe, Japan, India, and a few other places with continuous long-term records since 1880. And the Southern Hemisphere is even worse. They have very few long-term stations in the Southern Hemisphere. NASA gets almost all of their temperature data from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and this map is from them. The map shows where they have daily temperature data from the years 1891 to 1920. Once again, outside of the United States, Western Europe, and parts of Australia, NOAA has very little daily temperature data from 1891 to 1920. Most of the Earth has essentially no coverage. The vast majority of high-quality data is from the United States. The lack of coverage in other places makes the U.S. temperature data extremely important for understanding the long-term temperature record. So let's take a closer look at the U.S. temperature data. In 1999, NASA showed that the warmest year in the United States was 1934, and that the United States cooled quite a bit from the 1930s through the end of the 20th century. But unfortunately, NASA and NOAA have tampered with the temperature data, and now they show warming from the 1930s through the end of the 20th century. This was the official NASA 1999 U.S. temperature graph, and this is what it looked like 20 years later. They turned cooling into warming. Gavin and his friends took the best temperature data set in the world and tampered with it to produce his desired result. This graph shows what they've done. They cooled summer temperatures from 1921 about 1.25 degrees Fahrenheit and have warmed recent temperatures by almost half a degree Fahrenheit. So via the magic of government data tampering, they erased the heat of 1921. Millions of people suffered in 1921's record heat wave, and it's pretty horrific what Gavin and his friends are doing to the historical record. People frequently ask me, how can you criticize NASA? They're the people who took us to the moon. I'm pretty certain that Gavin wasn't actually involved in the moon launch. And many of the people with the right stuff who did take us to the moon feel the same way about NASA climate as I do. 10 years ago, 49 of the top people from the Apollo program wrote a letter to the NASA administrator telling them that NASA climate scientists were embarrassing the agency. It's very gratifying to me to be on the same side of the debate as NASA's heroes. And at the same time, I'm blocked by NASA's scoundrels. Toto has been pulling back the curtain on Gavin's junk science for the past 14 years. You can visit him, Kyrie, and Caesar on the web at realclimatescience.com.